My name is Sarah. I'm 29 years old, and what was supposed to be a joyful birthday celebration at my favorite cafe turned into the moment my entire world shifted. I was surrounded by family and friends, candles flickering on my cake, when I overheard my mum whisper something to my brother that made my blood run cold. "While everyone's here, go and change the locks at her apartment." I never imagined those words would save my life. If you're watching this video, let me know where you're from and hit subscribe to follow this unbelievable story that changed everything. I've always prided myself on building a beautiful life. As an interior designer with my own small but growing business in downtown Portland, I transform spaces for others while creating my own sanctuary. My apartment, a renovated loft in a historic building, showcases my personal style perfectly. Exposed brick walls adorned with local artwork, vintage furniture I've lovingly restored, and plants thriving on every windowsill. This space represents not just my aesthetic sense, but the independence I've worked so hard to achieve. For the past 3 years, Jack had become an increasingly central part of that life. Handsome, successful, and seemingly devoted, he was everything I thought I wanted. We met at a charity gala where his financial firm was a major sponsor. I was designing the event space, and he approached me with genuine interest in my creative process. That night, we talked for hours about everything from childhood dreams to future aspirations. His confidence was magnetic, his attention flattering. When he asked for my number, it felt like the beginning of something special. Our relationship progressed quickly. Jack was attentive in ways no previous boyfriend had been. He remembered small details about my preferences, sent flowers to my office, and always made time for me, despite his demanding job as finance director. Within 6 months, we had established routines. Sunday brunches at our favorite bistro, evening walks along the riverfront, weekend getaways to the coast. He integrated seamlessly into my life, winning over my friends with his charm and generosity. My upcoming birthday meant so much because it would bring together the people I loved most, especially my family, who rarely gathered in one place anymore. Mum Linda lives just outside the city, running the small bookstore she opened after retiring from teaching. She's always been the practical protective force in our family. When I was little and fell off my bike, she'd clean my scrapes, tell me to be more careful, then send me right back out to try again. That blend of care and pushing me forward shaped who I am. Dad Richard still lives in our family home an hour's drive away. After Mum and he separated 5 years ago, he threw himself into woodworking, creating beautiful furniture in his garage workshop. He's always been the listener in the family, the one who sits quietly until he has something meaningful to say. Despite their separation, my parents maintained a respectful relationship, united in their love for their children. My brother Daniel has always been my best friend. 3 years older and infinitely wiser in my childhood eyes, he now works as a cybersecurity specialist. His analytical mind and protective nature made him someone I've always turned to in times of doubt. When I was deciding whether to start my own business, it was Daniel who helped me create a realistic business plan and who loaned me startup money when banks wouldn't. The dinner reservation at Café was special. Not just a birthday celebration, but a rare gathering of everyone important to me. Friends from various phases of my life would be there along with my family. Even Jack had rearranged his business trip to attend, though he mentioned multiple times how difficult that had been. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs with Jack. How he subtly criticized my outfit choices, suggesting alternatives that were more flattering or more professional. How he'd text constantly when we were apart, expecting immediate responses. How he'd casually mention disliking certain friends of mine until I gradually saw them less. How he'd frame his opinions as facts, making me doubt my own judgment. But love has a way of casting shadows as light, transforming control into care, possession into passion. The weeks before my birthday were filled with anticipation and planning. Jack offered to handle the restaurant reservation, but seemed annoyed when I insisted on Café Laurent instead of the upscale steakhouse he preferred. I was firm. This was my birthday, and the cozy French cafe, with its intimate lighting and incredible desserts, was exactly where I wanted to celebrate. I felt truly happy and secure. My business was thriving with new clients, referred by word of mouth. My relationship seemed solid despite occasional tensions. My family was healthy and supportive. Everything was falling perfectly into place. I had no idea how quickly it would all unravel, or that the people who loved me had already begun to see what I couldn't. The first hint that something wasn't right came 3 weeks before my birthday. We were having Sunday dinner at my mum's house, a monthly tradition. Daniel brought his new girlfriend Amanda, and the conversation flowed easily until Jack mentioned his upcoming business trip to Chicago. "Didn't you just go to Chicago last month?" Daniel asked casually. Jack's smile tightened slightly. Different client, different project. The financial world doesn't pause, unlike government work. The slight jab at Daniel's public sector cybersecurity job created an uncomfortable silence. Later that evening, I noticed my mum and Daniel talking quietly in the kitchen. They stopped abruptly when I entered Mom's face, composing quickly into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just catching up," Daniel replied, but something in his tone felt off. The morning of my birthday began with an unexpected call from Daniel at 7 a.m. "Happy birthday, sis," he said, his voice strangely tense. "Quick question. Did you give Jack a key to your apartment?" "Of course," I laughed. "We've been together 3 years, Daniel." "Right. And does he ever come over when you're not home?" "Sometimes he surprises me by dropping off flowers or picking up something I need." "Why all the questions?" "No reason. Just curious about the birthday surprise he mentioned." Daniel's tone was casual, but something felt off. "See you tonight at the cafe." After the call, I lay in bed thinking about how lucky I was to have Jack. He'd left early for a meeting, but sent a beautiful text message with promises of a special gift later. When I finally got up to get ready for work, I found he'd left an outfit laid out on the chair. A new blue dress with a note saying it would bring out my eyes and asking me to wear it that evening. The gesture was sweet, though I'd planned to wear my favourite red dress. Still, it seemed a small concession to make him happy. The workday flew by with client calls and vendor meetings. My assistant Jenny brought cupcakes and my small team sang happy birthday. By 5 p.m. I was heading home to change excitement building for the evening ahead. When I unlocked my apartment door, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The throw pillows on my couch were arranged differently. Books on my shelves seemed slightly out of order. My laptop, which I always left closed on my desk, was open at a slight angle. "Jack!" I called out, though I knew he was supposed to be at work. No answer. I moved cautiously through my apartment, noting small disturbances. A drawer not fully closed, my jewelry box slightly ajar, the bathroom cabinet door open. Nothing seemed to be missing, but everything felt slightly disturbed. When Jack called an hour later, I mentioned what I'd found. He laughed lightly. "Busted, I was looking for the perfect hiding spot for your gift. Sorry if I moved things around. Don't worry, I'll tidy up tomorrow." The explanation made sense, but a small knot of unease remained in my stomach. As I got ready for the evening, I opted for my red dress instead of the blue one Jack had left. It was my birthday after all, and the red dress made me feel confident. Just as I was about to leave, Jack texted asking for a photo of my outfit. When I sent it, his response was immediate. The blue dress would be better for the restaurant lighting. There's still time to change. I stared at the message, irritation rising. It was just a dress, but it felt symbolic of something larger. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Already running late, red it is tonight," and turned my phone to silent. On my way to the cafe, I remembered I'd left Jack's gift, a vintage watch I'd found at an antique store, on my nightstand. Too late to go back now. The thought of the disrupted apartment flashed through my mind again. Jack had never gone through my things before, at least not that I'd noticed. Just before turning into the cafe parking lot, I checked my phone to find 5 missed texts from Jack, each more insistent than the last, asking why I wasn't responding and reminding me about the blue dress. The final message simply said, "We'll discuss this later." A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed the feeling aside. It was just a dress, and this was my birthday. I wouldn't let anything spoil it. When I walked into the cafe, my family was already there. Mum, Dad and Daniel seated at our reserved table. Their smiles seemed forced conversations halting as I approached. Dad stood to hug me, whispering, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," while Mum squeezed my hand a little too tightly. "Where's Jack?" Daniel asked immediately. "Running late. Last-minute meeting," I replied, repeating what Jack had texted. The 3 of them exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "What's going on?" I asked. "You're all acting weird." "Nothing's wrong, Mum said quickly. "We're just excited to celebrate with you." But something in her eyes told me different. For the first time, I wondered if my family knew something about Jack that I didn't. Café Laurent was exactly as I'd requested. Intimate yet lively, with fairy lights strung across the ceiling and fresh flowers on every table. The owner, Martine, had reserved my favourite corner spot near the window, with a view of both the street and the small courtyard garden. The table was beautifully set with linen napkins, crystal glasses, and a small happy birthday sign propped against a vase of sunflowers. My favorite. My friends began arriving, Jenny from work, my college roommate Zoe, and several others. Each arrival brought hugs, gifts, and excited chatter. The cafe filled with laughter and conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my family was on edge, their eyes constantly darting to the door. When Jack finally arrived 30 minutes late, everyone fell momentarily silent. He looked immaculate in his tailored suit, carrying a large gift bag and wearing his most charming smile, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a coldness that made me shiver. "Sorry I'm late, everyone," he announced, kissing my cheek quickly. "Client emergency, you know how it is." See, he nodded at my family with stiff politeness before taking the seat beside me. Under the table, his hand gripped my thigh, hard enough to hurt. "I see you chose the red dress," he whispered, his smile never faltering. Dinner proceeded with an undercurrent of tension beneath the celebration. Dad told funny stories from my childhood, Mum proudly updated everyone on my recent design project that had been featured in a local magazine, and my friends added their own anecdotes. Jack laughed at all the right moments, offered charming commentary, and kept his hand possessively on mine throughout the meal. "Let's order Sarah's favourite dessert," Zoe suggested as we finished our main courses. "The chocolate souffle here is amazing." "Actually, Sarah's watching her sugar intake," Jack interjected smoothly. "She mentioned wanting to cut back, right, honey? I hadn't said anything of the sort, and chocolate souffle was exactly what I'd been looking forward to." Before I could contradict him, Jack's phone rang. "I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "Order whatever you want, birthday girl." He kissed the top of my head and walked toward the entrance phone pressed to his ear. As soon as Jack was out of earshot, the table's atmosphere shifted. Daniel leaned forward, about to say something, when Mum cut him off with a sharp glance. She turned to Dad instead, her voice low but urgent. "Richard, while everyone's here, tell your son to go change the locks at her apartment. Now's our chance." I froze my water glass halfway to my lips. "Change my locks, Mum? What are you talking about?" Mum's face paled as she realized I'd overheard. She exchanged a look with Dad, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Daniel, go now," Dad said quietly. "We'll explain later." Without hesitation, Daniel stood grabbing his jacket. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he told me, squeezing my shoulder as he passed. "Just enjoy your party, Sarah. Trust us." Confusion and alarm battled inside me as I watched my brother leave. "Someone needs to tell me what's going on," I insisted, looking from Mum to Dad. "Not here. Not now." Mum whispered, her eyes flicking toward the cafe entrance, where Jack stood still on his phone, but watching our table intently. "We'll explain everything soon. Just act normal." My friends, sensing the tension, but unaware of its cause, valiantly steered the conversation to lighter topics. Jenny launched into a story about a difficult client, and Zoe began showing photos from her recent vacation. I smiled and nodded, but my mind raced with questions and growing dread. When Jack returned to the table, he immediately noticed Daniel's absence. "Where's your brother?" he asked casually, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Work emergency," Dad said smoothly. "Something about a security breach. He'll try to make it back." Jack seemed to accept this explanation, though he checked his watch with obvious irritation. "Should we do gifts now since we're missing a guest?" he suggested. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of colourful wrapping paper and thoughtful presents. Mum gave me a first edition of my favourite childhood book. Dad presented a handmade jewellery box he'd crafted in his workshop, and my friends offered a collection of meaningful trinkets and inside jokes turned tangible. When it was Jack's turn, he handed me the large gift bag with flourish. Inside was a small jewellery box containing diamond earrings that must have cost thousands. "They're beautiful," I said automatically, though they were far more ostentatious than anything I'd choose for myself. "Only the best for you," Jack replied loud enough for everyone to hear. Then leaning closer, he whispered, "The blue dress would have matched them perfectly." Throughout the gift opening, Jack kept checking his phone, typing rapid responses to texts. Each time I engaged in conversation with my friends, particularly with Zoe's boyfriend Ryan, Jack would find ways to interrupt or redirect my attention back to him, placing his hand on mine, asking me a direct question, or making an inside joke only we would understand. The chocolate souffle arrived with a single candle, and everyone sang happy birthday. As I closed my eyes to make a wish, one thought crystallized with surprising clarity. Something isn't right. I need to understand what my family knows. An hour passed with no sign of Daniel. The party continued with forced gaiety, but I caught Mom checking her phone repeatedly under the table. Jack had become increasingly possessive, his arm draped across the back of my chair, fingers occasionally brushing my shoulder in what would appear to others as an affectionate gesture, but felt to me like a claim of ownership. Whenever I tried to move around the table to chat with friends, Jack found reasons to keep me close, asking me to explain a story to him, requesting that I help him choose wine, complaining of a headache that mysteriously improved when I returned to his side. Zoe pulled me aside during a bathroom break, her expression concerned. "Is everything okay with you and Jack? He seems different tonight." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she was referring to. "I don't know. More controlling. The comment about your sugar intake was weird, and he barely lets you talk to anyone else." She hesitated. Ryan mentioned that Jack cornered him at the bar and questioned him about how long we've been dating and how often you two hang out. Before I could respond, the bathroom door opened and Jenny poked her head in. "Sarah, Jack's looking for you. Says you've been gone too long." A sick feeling settled in my stomach. How many other controlling behaviours had I missed or explained away? When I returned to the table, Daniel had finally reappeared. His face was ashen, his usual confident demeanour replaced by something I'd never seen before. Raw fear mixed with suppressed anger. He whispered something to Mom, whose hand flew to her mouth before she composed herself. Jack was engrossed in conversation with Dad, who was doing an admirable job of appearing interested despite the obvious tension in his jaw. I slid into my seat and Daniel immediately caught my eye, giving a slight shake of his head. A clear message not to ask questions yet. "There you are," Jack said, turning from Dad with obvious relief. "I was about to come looking for you." "Just catching up with the girls," I replied, working to keep my voice light. Jack checked his watch pointedly. "We should probably think about heading out soon. You mentioned being tired earlier." I hadn't said anything about being tired. "Actually, I'm feeling great," I countered, smiling around the table. "I'd love another glass of wine. Anyone else?" Several friends raised their glasses in agreement, and Jack's expression darkened momentarily before he recovered his charming facade. "Of course, whatever the birthday girl wants. I just know you have that early client meeting tomorrow." I had no such meeting and Jack knew it. Daniel cleared his throat. "Actually, Jack, I wanted to ask you about that investment opportunity you mentioned last time we met. Mind if I pick your brain for a few minutes?" It was a transparent attempt to separate Jack from me, but it worked. Jack couldn't refuse without appearing rude, so he reluctantly moved to sit beside Daniel at the far end of the table. The moment they were engaged in conversation, Mum slid into Jack's vacant seat. "Sarah," she began quietly, "I can't explain everything now, but I need you to promise me something. Don't go home with Jack tonight. Come to my house or go to Daniel's." "Mum, you're scaring me. What's going on? Why did Daniel change my locks?" She glanced toward Jack, ensuring he was still occupied. "Your brother found something in your apartment. Several somethings, actually. We've suspected for a while that Jack isn't who he pretends to be, but now we have proof." "Proof of what?" My voice trembled despite my efforts to stay calm. "That he's been—" Mum stopped abruptly as Jack stood up and headed toward us. "I'll explain later. Just don't be alone with him tonight." Before I could press further, Jack returned, effectively ending our conversation. He reclaimed his seat casually, draping his arm around me once more. "What were you two whispering about?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes watchful. "Mum was just suggesting I open her gift again." I lied smoothly. "I didn't get a good look at it earlier with everything going on." Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your mother is always so thoughtful." The evening progressed with increasing tension. I caught Daniel and my parents exchanging meaningful glances, and my friends seemed to pick up on the atmosphere, making excuses to leave earlier than planned. By 10 o'clock, only my immediate family remained, along with Jack, who showed no signs of leaving. "I need to use the restroom," Jack announced, standing. "Order me another scotch, would you, Sarah?" The moment he was out of sight, I turned to Daniel. "Tell me right now what you found in my apartment." Daniel's face was grim. "Surveillance equipment, Sarah. Tiny cameras in your bedroom, bathroom, living room. A tracking device in your purse. Software installed on your laptop that forwards all your emails and messages to another account. A folder hidden in your closet with copies of your personal documents, financial records, even your diary." The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible," I whispered, though deep down pieces were falling into place. The disturbed apartment, Jack's inexplicable knowledge of conversations I'd never shared with him, his uncanny ability to show up unexpectedly wherever I was. "I've removed everything I could find," Daniel continued urgently. "Changed your locks, secured your devices. But Sarah, this isn't normal jealousy or insecurity. This is dangerous, calculated behavior." "He's coming back," Mum warned her eyes on the hallway to the restrooms. "Act normal," Dad advised. "We'll get through this together." As Jack returned to the table, I felt as though I was seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the charming, successful man I thought I loved, but someone wearing that man like a mask. And that mask was beginning to slip. I returned to the table with my mind racing but my exterior carefully composed. Jack was watching me with unusual intensity, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The cafe had emptied considerably, with just a few other patrons lingering over coffee at distant tables. Our small family group now sat in uncomfortable silence. "I think it's time to call it a night," Jack announced, placing his hand firmly on my back. "Sarah has had a long day of celebration. Thank you all for coming." The dismissal in his tone was unmistakable. "Actually," Mum interjected, "we haven't had dessert yet. I asked Martine to bring out that chocolate soufflé Sarah loves." Jack's fingers pressed harder into my back. "Sarah's watching her sugar intake. Remember, Linda? We discussed this earlier." The lie hung in the air between us. We had never had such a discussion. "It's my birthday," I said quietly but firmly, "and I want soufflé." Jack's expression flickered. Surprise, then irritation before settling back into practiced charm. "Of course, whatever you want, sweetheart." But his voice had an edge I recognized from the rare occasions I'd contradicted him before. Dad engaged Jack in conversation about stock markets, while Mum and Daniel flanked me protectively. Under the tablecloth, Daniel passed me his phone with a text message open. Jack left his phone on the table when he went to get drinks. I saw notifications from an app that tracks your location. "Be careful what you say, we'll get through this." I deleted the message and handed the phone back, my heart hammering. The soufflé arrived and I went through the motions of enjoying it, though each bite felt like cardboard in my mouth. "I need to use the restroom," I announced, standing up. "I'll come with you," Mum offered immediately. "No need," Jack said smoothly, already rising. "I'll walk with Sarah. I need to make a quick call anyway." I could see the alarm in my family's eyes, but before anyone could object, Jack had guided me away from the table, his hand firmly at the small of my back. In the narrow hallway leading to the restrooms, Jack stopped abruptly. "You're acting strangely tonight," he said, his voice low. "And your family is being particularly intrusive." "It's just been an emotional day," I replied, trying to move past him. He blocked my path. "Where did Daniel really go earlier? And don't lie to me, Sarah. I always know when you're lying." The menace in his tone made my skin crawl. Before I could answer, I noticed his phone in his jacket pocket screen illuminated with a notification. In that brief moment, I glimpsed my own name and what looked like a map. "I really need to use the restroom, Jack," I insisted, pushing past him. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. My mind raced through options. I needed to see what was on Jack's phone, needed proof of what Daniel had told me. But how? As I washed my hands, a plan formed. I would pretend everything was normal, wait for an opportunity when Jack was distracted, and then check his phone. It was risky, but I needed to know the truth for myself. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere was glacial. Jack's charm had noticeably thinned, and my family sat in tense silence. "Sarah," Jack said immediately, "I've asked for the check. You mentioned earlier you were getting tired." Another lie. "But we haven't finished our wine," I protested, reaching for my glass. "You've had enough," he said quietly, but with unmistakable authority. My father straightened in his seat, but before he could speak, Jack's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned and stood. "I need to take this. Business never sleeps." He walked toward the entrance, leaving his jacket draped over his chair. It was my chance. With shaking hands, I reached for his jacket, slipping my hand into the pocket to extract his phone. The screen was locked, but when a notification appeared, I swiped it open, a feature Jack had enabled for convenience. What I saw made my blood freeze. An app labeled "Will Track Her" showed a detailed map with a pulsing blue dot, my current location at the cafe. Another app called Listen Live had a recording titled Sarah Bedroom 10:15, yesterday's date. A folder contained dozens of photos of me, sleeping, changing clothes, working at my desk, all taken without my knowledge. "Oh my God," I whispered, scrolling frantically. His email was open, showing correspondence with a private investigator about my daily routines, friends, and colleagues. Text messages revealed conversations with someone named Alex about keeping her isolated and monitoring all communications. Sarah, Jack's voice behind me was ice cold. I hadn't heard him return. I looked up, still holding his phone, the damning evidence displayed on the screen. What is this, Jack? Why are you tracking me? Recording me in my own home? The mask dropped completely. His handsome face contorted with rage and something else. Ownership. Give me my phone, he demanded, hand outstretched. No, I clutched it tighter, backing away. You've been spying on me, controlling me. Why? Because you're mine, he said simply, as if explaining something obvious. Because I need to protect what's mine. You think I don't see how men look at you? How you encourage it? I see everything, Sarah. Every text, every email, every conversation. The cafe had fallen silent, other patrons watching our confrontation. Daniel stood, moving protectively toward me. Stay out of this, Jack snapped at him before turning back to me. His voice softened, becoming almost pleading. I do it because I love you, Sarah, more than anyone else ever could. I need to know you're safe, faithful. This isn't love, I said, my voice gaining strength. This is control. This is abuse. Abuse, Jack laughed bitterly. I've given you everything, protected you, guided you. Without me, what would you be? Free, I whispered, the realization dawning with crystal clarity. Jack's expression darkened. Give me the phone, Sarah. Now. We're leaving. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging painfully into my flesh. Let go of her. Daniel's voice was deadly quiet as he stepped between us. This doesn't concern you, Jack hissed, but his grip loosened slightly. My sister concerns me, Daniel replied, especially when I find cameras hidden in her shower, her bedroom, when I find spyware on her devices and tracking bugs in her purse. Jack's face registered shock, then fury. You had no right to touch my property. Her apartment isn't your property, so Mum interjected, having joined us. And neither is she. Sarah, Jack turned to me, his expression suddenly desperate. I did it for us, to protect our relationship. I can change. I'll remove the cameras. I'll stop the tracking. Just come home with me tonight, and we'll talk about it. For a moment, I wavered. 3 years of emotional manipulation had left their mark. Then I looked down at his phone still in my hand, at the evidence of his obsessive control. I took a screenshot and sent it to my own number, then another and another. It's over, Jack, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I want you out of my life. You don't mean that, he said, his tone hardening. You're upset, confused. Your family has poisoned you against me, but you're still mine, Sarah. You'll always be mine. No, she won't, Dad said, having joined our growing circle. My daughter doesn't belong to anyone, especially not to someone who terrorizes her under the guise of love. Jack laughed, a cold sound that sent chills down my spine. Terrorizes? I've done nothing illegal. In fact, he smiled, a calculating expression crossing his face. Those screenshots you just took, Sarah. That's invasion of privacy. I could press charges. And actually, Daniel interjected, installing surveillance equipment without consent is illegal in this state, as is cyber stalking, which I've documented extensively from your intrusions into Sarah's digital life. Jack's face contorted with rage. You think this is over? It's not over until I say it's over. He lunged for me, but Daniel was faster, blocking his path. Leave now, Daniel said quietly, or I call the police and show them everything I found. Do it, Jack sneered. It'll be my word against yours. Who do you think they'll believe, a respected financial director or a government tech drone? They'll believe evidence, I said, finding my voice. They'll believe these screenshots. The cameras Daniel removed from my apartment, the tracking data, the recordings. Jack's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. Sarah, baby, listen to me. I know I went too far, but it was only because I love you so much. I'm possessive because you're precious to me. We can work through this. I'll get therapy. I'll change. The sincerity in his voice almost made me doubt myself, a testament to how effectively he'd manipulated me for years. But the evidence in my hand was irrefutable. No, Jack, we're done. I handed his phone back to him, the screenshots safely sent to my own device. I want you to leave, now. Jack stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he grabbed my arm again, jerking me toward him. You don't get to decide when this ends, he hissed. Before anyone could react, the cafe owner, Martine, appeared with 2 male servers. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "This man was just leaving," Dad said firmly. Surrounded and outnumbered, Jack released my arm, straightening his suit jacket with forced dignity. "This isn't over, Sarah," he said quietly. "Not by a long shot." He turned and walked out, each step precise and controlled. As the door closed behind him, my legs gave way. Daniel caught me before I could fall, guiding me to a chair. The full weight of what had happened, what had been happening for years, crashed over me in waves. "He's been watching me, recording me, controlling everything," I whispered, shock setting in. "How did I not see it?" "Because he didn't want you to see it," Mum said gently, taking my hand. "These men are experts at making you doubt yourself, at making their control seem like love. And we weren't there enough to help you see it sooner," Dad added, guilt evident in his voice. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly terrified of leaving the safety of the cafe, of the possibility of Jack waiting outside. "Now," Daniel said firmly, "we make sure you're safe. You're coming home with me tonight. Tomorrow we'll get a restraining order. And then one day at a time, you'll reclaim your life." I nodded, tears finally coming. Not tears of fear or even sadness, but of relief. For the first time in years, I could see the cage that had been built around me, and the door that now stood open. My brother's apartment felt like a fortress that night. Daniel lived in a secure building with doorman service, a precaution related to his cybersecurity work that now served a more personal protective function. He insisted I take his bedroom while he camped on the couch, setting up a makeshift security system using his laptop and some hastily installed sensors. "He won't find you here," Daniel assured me as he showed me the emergency contacts he'd programmed into my phone. "But if he somehow does, you'll have warning and we'll have evidence." I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my red birthday dress, feeling simultaneously numb and hyper-aware. "How did you know?" I asked. "About Jack. How long have you suspected?" Daniel sat beside me, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It wasn't one big thing, but lots of little ones. The way he always answered questions for you. How he'd call repeatedly if you were with us and didn't pick up immediately. The strange coincidences, like him showing up at restaurants where you were having girls' night out. I thought those were sweet gestures," I said quietly. "That he wanted to surprise me. 2 months ago, I noticed how you'd check with him before making any decisions, even small ones. The old Sarah never did that." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Then last week, when you mentioned he'd reminded you that you didn't like that new Thai restaurant, a place I distinctly remember you raving about, something clicked. So you hired a private investigator." "No, I became one," Daniel grimaced. "I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I did a security sweep of your apartment when you and Jack were at that charity event last weekend. Found the first camera hidden in your living room bookshelf. After that, I knew I needed to do a thorough check." And Mom and Dad, they knew too. I told them my suspicions. Mom recognized the signs immediately. Apparently her college roommate had been in a similar situation. Dad was skeptical at first, wanted concrete evidence, before potentially ruining your relationship. Daniel's expression darkened. He's not skeptical anymore. The reality of my situation was still sinking in. For years, I'd been under surveillance in my most private moments. My communications monitored my movements, tracked my relationships, scrutinized and often sabotaged. How could I have been so blind? The question emerged as a whisper. "Because he was careful," Daniel said firmly. "These people don't start with cameras and trackers. They start with love and attention. They isolate you slowly. They make their jealousy seem like devotion. By the time the mask slips, you're already trapped in their version of reality." My phone buzzed. The 20th text from Jack since we'd left the cafe. I hadn't read any of them, but the notifications kept coming, each one making me flinch. Daniel took the phone gently from my hands. "Let me handle this," he said, turning it off. "Tomorrow we'll get you a new number, new accounts. Tonight you need to rest." Rest seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually won out. I fell asleep still in my dress, Daniel keeping watch from a chair by the window, his laptop illuminating his determined face. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Mum arrived early with fresh clothes and necessities. Dad followed shortly after, having spoken with his friend who practiced family law. By noon, we were at the courthouse filing for an emergency restraining order. The evidence from Jack's phone and the surveillance equipment Daniel had removed from my apartment providing compelling justification. "This is just the beginning," the lawyer warned us. "Men like this don't give up easily, but we've started the paper trail and that's crucial." He was right. Over the next few days, Jack's attempts to contact me grew increasingly desperate, then threatening. He showed up at my parents' house, claiming concern for my mental health. He sent flowers to my office with cards suggesting reconciliation. When those tactics failed, the messages darkened. Reminders of private moments he'd witnessed through his cameras veiled threats about embarrassing recordings he'd kept. Each incident was documented, each threat added to the growing file. A week after my birthday, the temporary restraining order became more permanent. 2 weeks after police escorted me to my apartment to collect essential belongings. The place no longer felt like home. Every corner, every surface, every mirror now represented potential surveillance and violation. I moved temporarily into my mother's guest room, the childhood bedroom I'd once been so eager to leave, now representing safety and autonomy. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning home as a path to independence. The hardest part wasn't the practical challenges of rebuilding my life. It wasn't even the frightening moments when I'd glimpse Jack's car driving slowly past my mother's house, or the hang-up calls that came despite my changed number. The hardest part was confronting how thoroughly I'd lost myself in the relationship. Friends I'd gradually stopped seeing reached out after hearing rumors of the breakup. Several shared concerns they'd had about Jack's controlling behavior, but hadn't known how to express. Zoe admitted she'd almost staged an intervention 6 months earlier, after Jack had accidentally deleted male contacts from my phone during a dinner party. "I should have said something," she said tearfully over coffee in my mum's kitchen. "But you seemed so happy and he was so convincing when he explained things away." "I wouldn't have listened," I admitted. I was too deep in it. Slowly, painfully, I began to reclaim my life. I worked with Daniel to secure new devices, new passwords, new digital habits. I scheduled sessions with a therapist who specialized in recovery from controlling relationships. I reconnected with friends and clients who'd been gradually pushed out of my life. A month after my birthday, I found a new apartment in a secure building across town. Daniel insisted on installing a comprehensive security system, and Dad built custom locks for all the doors. The place was smaller than my previous loft, but felt immeasurably larger without the shadow of surveillance. There were setbacks. Jack found ways to circumvent the restraining order, sending messages through mutual acquaintances, engineering accidental encounters in public places, even creating fake social media accounts to monitor my gradually resuming online presence. Each violation strengthened our legal case, but also reinforced how determined he was to maintain some form of control. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was working late in my new office space when my phone rang, an unknown number I normally would have ignored. "Sarah? It's Alex. Alex Donovan. I worked with Jack." The name triggered an immediate connection. Alex from the text messages on Jack's phone, the one who had helped him monitor me. "What do you want?" I asked coldly, my finger hovering over the end call button. "To apologize. And to help." His voice was shaking. I didn't know how far it went. I thought I was just helping a jealous boyfriend check up occasionally. When I saw the news about the restraining order, I started digging deeper. What I found... He paused. "It's worse than you know, Sarah, and he's done it before." Alex's revelations led to a meeting with the district attorney. The evidence he provided, documentation of Jack's previous victims, the sophisticated surveillance network he'd established, the identity theft he'd committed to access my financial records, transformed a restraining order violation case into something much more serious. 2 weeks later, Jack was arrested outside my office building where he'd been waiting in his car. The charges included stalking illegal surveillance violation of privacy, identity theft, and multiple restraining order violations. I stood in the courtroom during his arraignment, surrounded by my family, facing the man who had nearly consumed my identity with his obsession. He looked smaller somehow, his charming facade cracked to reveal the insecurity and rage beneath. When the judge denied bail based on flight risk and danger to victims, Jack finally looked at me directly. I expected to feel fear meeting his gaze. Instead, I felt something unexpected pity mixed with a fierce determination that he never do this to anyone else. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt. The question seemed impossible to answer in a soundbite. How could I explain the complex journey from love to fear to freedom? "I'm reclaiming my story," I said finally, "one day at a time." 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I sat in my new apartment, morning light streaming through windows I no longer feared might conceal cameras. The place reflected my authentic design aesthetic. Bold colours, eclectic furniture, walls covered with art by local female artists who explored themes of transformation and autonomy. The journey of healing hadn't been linear. There were nights I still woke in panic, convinced I was being watched. Days when ordinary interactions triggered memories of Jack's manipulation. Moments when trusting anyone, even my family, required conscious effort. But there were also breakthrough moments that marked my progress. The first time I made a significant decision without seeking anyone's approval. The day I presented designs to a new client without hearing Jack's voice in my head, criticizing my choices. The evening I went on a casual date with a kind architect I'd met through work. Nothing serious, but a step toward believing in healthy connections again. My therapist, Dr. Winters, had been instrumental in helping me understand the psychology behind controlling relationships. What happened wasn't your fault, she emphasized in our weekly sessions. These relationships don't start with control and isolation. They start with love bombing, with creating a sense that this person understands you better than anyone else ever has. Gradually, I recognized the warning signs I'd missed. How Jack had created emergencies that required my attention whenever I planned independent activities. How he'd criticized my friends subtly until I began to see them through his disapproving lens. How he'd framed his jealousy as devotion and his control as protection. Perhaps most importantly, I learned to recognize those patterns in other relationships. When a new client became overly demanding of my time and dismissive of my creative decisions, I recognized the red flags immediately and established firm boundaries. When a charming man at a gallery opening seemed too interested in my daily routines and previous relationship, I trusted my instincts and declined his dinner invitation. My family remained my strongest support system. Mum and I had weekly dinners where we gradually shifted from discussing the trauma to sharing everyday joys and future plans. Dad channeled his protective instincts into teaching me basic self-defense and home security. And Daniel, whose vigilance had quite literally saved me, finally stopped checking in 3 times daily. Progress for both of us. Jack's case moved slowly through the legal system, but each development brought additional closure. 3 other women came forward with similar experiences, strengthening the prosecution's case. Financial investigations revealed he'd diverted company funds to pay for surveillance equipment and private investigators, adding fraud charges to his growing list of offences. I chose not to attend every hearing, refusing to structure my life around his legal proceedings. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my design business, which had suffered during the tumultuous months following our breakup. A feature in a local lifestyle magazine brought new clients, including a women's shelter that wanted to redesign their living spaces to feel more like homes than institutions. That project became a turning point in my healing journey. Working with women who had escaped controlling and abusive relationships gave purpose to my pain. I incorporated their insights into creating spaces that promoted autonomy, peace, and safety. Each completed room represented not just professional accomplishment, but personal redemption. The shelter director, Maria herself, a survivor of domestic violence, became both client and friend. "What you're doing here," she told me as we put finishing touches on the shelter's community room, "is turning your trauma into transformation, not just for yourself, but for others." Her words resonated deeply. I began speaking at community events about recognizing the signs of controlling relationships. I created a resource guide for interior designers to help them identify potential surveillance equipment when working in clients' homes. Small actions perhaps, but each one helped transform my victimhood into advocacy. On the anniversary of that fateful birthday dinner, I decided to reclaim the date by hosting a small gathering at my new apartment. Family, close friends, and the new connections I'd made during my year of rebuilding. No fancy restaurant, no expensive gifts, just authentic connection with people who respected my boundaries and celebrated my growth. As I prepared for the evening arranging flowers and setting out appetizers, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A woman I was still getting to know stronger than before, more vigilant, but not fearful, scarred, but healing. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Mum, Dad, and Daniel arms full of food and decorations. Their faces showed not pity, but pride, not worry, but celebration. "Happy real birthday," Daniel said, hugging me tightly. "The first of many where you're truly free." The evening unfolded with laughter, honest conversation, and moments of genuine connection. As we gathered around my dining table, a vintage piece I'd restored myself, I looked at each face and felt overwhelming gratitude. "I want to thank you all," I said, raising my glass. "Not just for being here tonight, but for helping me find myself again, for showing me that real love doesn't diminish you, it helps you grow." Later, as the gathering wound down and guests departed with warm hugs and plans for future get-togethers, I stood on my small balcony watching the city lights. Mum joined me, draping a light shawl around my shoulders against the evening chill. "You've come so far," she said quietly. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without all of you," I replied, "without you noticing what I couldn't see." "That's what love is supposed to do," Mum said. "Not confine you, but watch over you. Not control you, but support you. Not diminish you, but help you shine." The truth of her words settled deeply in my heart. The healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. But I was reclaiming my story one day at a time, writing new chapters filled with authentic connections, meaningful work, and genuine freedom. The greatest gift, I told her, was learning the difference between someone watching you because they want to control you and someone watching out for you because they want you to be free. I turned back toward my apartment, toward the warmth and light within. Not perfect, but mine. Not what I had planned, but somehow exactly what I needed. Has someone in your life ever quietly protected you when you didn't realize you needed protection? Or have you recognized warning signs in a relationship that made you step back? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming and healing. Remember, sometimes the people who truly love us see dangers we cannot, and sometimes changing the locks is the first step to true freedom.